Hello, welcome to today's Mesa County 4-H and FFA Livestock Show and Sale Marketing Training. My name is Ruth Shepherdson. I'm an ag teacher for Plateau Valley High School, and I'm happy to share this information with you today. The first thing that we all need to understand is that while we learn a whole plethora of different things and we have awesome experiences in 4-H and FFA, the true purpose of the Mesa County Junior Livestock Sale is to produce and sell a quality meat product to our customers. And in order to do this, Mesa County has chosen to use what's called a Sift process. This is our way of ensuring that the animal is finished, that it has enough meat, that it is a high quality, healthy meat for our consumers. As a result, there are some rules to help protect the consumers and ensure that we continue to produce a high quality product. The first is that all sheep, swine, goats, rabbits, and poultry that are sold for market will be graded for readiness by the judge during the market shows. If the judge determines that any animal is not market ready, at the end of that class, the exhibitor will be given a white ribbon and the animal will be considered sifted. This simply means that the animal is not ready for sale yet, not ready for consumption, and makes that animal ineligible for sale at the junior livestock sale. The judge will make these determinations based off industry standards for each respective species. In some cases, this has to do with the size of the carcass. In some cases, this has to do with the quality of the carcass. Luckily, our judges are experts in those carcass and meat product quality standards, and so this helps us produce good quality animals. Now, as you noticed on that last slide, we didn't really refer to the beef project. Within the beef project, we'll do things just a little bit differently. All market beef will be graded for market readiness by a panel of evaluators following check-in or weigh-in. So if the panel determines the animal is not ready, again, that animal will be considered sifted, which makes that animal ineligible for sale in the junior livestock sale. The animal may be exhibited only in a feeder class during the market show. We use a panel that will make these determinations based off industry standards. So while the other species we just discussed will be judged for that basic quality standard in the show ring, beef will be by a panel of experts, and it will follow check-in or weigh-in, not during the show. There's a few other things in the rule book I want to make note of for you, and this will help you be successful and get to the sale, if you will. A lot of times we use the term that we made the sift, or we want to make the sift, meaning we want our animal to be above that quality line. Now, sometimes there are some real frustrations with the sifting process. It's never meant to be in a personal way. But it's kind of hard sometimes to switch from making that be about you as a 4-H or FFA member and really focus on producing a good quality animal. In the rule book, if you'll notice in the middle part of the slide, we are also given some weight guidelines that help ensure that we produce good quality animals. First off, a quick reminder at the top that the sale order shall go in the order of Grand Champion, Reserve Grand Champion, and then class placings. No sifted animals will be sold. We typically at the Mesa County Fair sell in blocks, which means in block 1 you may have all the first place beef, all the first place lambs, first place pigs. There's a set number of each. Then we go to block 2 and you may have to finish up the first place ones and move on to second place. So the best way to understand that is to check the sale order that morning and figure out when you are scheduled to sell your animal. All market lambs need to weigh between 100 and 170 pounds when checked in and weighed at the fair. The exception would be Whiteface and Southdown breeds, which need to weigh between 80 and 170 pounds. In addition, lambs must have gained a minimum of 20 pounds between the first weigh-in and fair to be eligible for a market class. Lambs that don't reach that minimum weight or achieve the minimum weight gain will be placed in a feeder class and ineligible for sale. Now, there is occasionally an exception to that. If you're in a situation where no beginning weigh-in can be held, then that minimum weight gain requirement has to be voided. Moving on to market swine. Market swine must weigh between 235 and 290 pounds to be eligible for a market class. Those that don't reach that minimum weight will be placed in a feeder class and ineligible for sale. And finally, market goats must weigh between 50 and 110 pounds and gained a minimum of 15 pounds between that first weigh-in and fair to be eligible for a market class. In terms of rabbits and poultry, I would encourage you to contact the superintendent and find that rule book. Sometimes the rules there are just a little bit different. For example, in poultry, oftentimes you're looking at a pen of 3, so it's more important how close in weight those birds are than for a minimum weight. Definitely read up on rule books before you start your project so that you set yourself up for success. Now, the million-dollar question is, why do you need to market your project? From the outside, I think sometimes it seems that buyers just magically show up to the Mesa County Fair and purchase animals and support youth because we live in an awesome place. While that is true, you are completing a project that you will benefit from. And you notice on this slide the word "you" is underlined several times because there is a sense of accountability that should be kind of settling into your guts, that your success financially in this project oftentimes is linked to how well you market your product. Here are some basics about the junior livestock sale that will help you understand how it works. The first is that it is governed by a marketing committee. The marketing committee works in conjunction with the Mesa County Fair Board and the cooperative extension agent. However, it is a separate entity that governs the sale, works directly with the buyers, takes care of the paperwork, and that kind of stuff. So anytime that you have major questions, you'll want to contact members of the marketing committee, as well as if you like to present new ideas or want to figure out how to be involved and help out. Now, when you get to the sale, there are several types of ways your animal could be purchased. And I want to take just a minute to explain each of those. For someone who's new to livestock sales, this can be a bit confusing, so don't feel bad if it feels like it's a lot, and be sure to ask questions if you aren't understanding. The first type of sale is a standard buy. Obviously, we are at an auction, so there will be an auctioneer and people taking bids. We call those oftentimes ringmen. And when someone bids on your animal, they'll let the auctioneer know, and the price will continue to raise until there's a kind of a time of silence, if you will, and the auctioneer will determine people are done bidding and then make the sale. So in a standard buy, let's say you take your lamb out into the sale ring, people bid $50, $75, $100, $150, $200, then it kind of gets quiet, and at $200, the auctioneer will eventually say, ask for other bids and then say it's sold. That's the simplest way, and I would say there's a good chunk of our animals at the sale that do get sold that way. A slightly more complicated way, but very beneficial program in our county is called the buyback program. In the buyback program, the animal is also sold to the highest bidder. However, at the end of that bidding, the auctioneer will kind of ask the buyer, and the buyer may say they want it to go buyback. Basically, that means that they are immediately reselling the animal in a bulk fashion to someone who will likely take it to a larger livestock auction or put it directly into the consumer meat production line. So the marketing committee arranges buyback buyers for each species. Like maybe they bring in someone that says, okay, I'll pay 98 cents a pound for all the lambs that go buyback. And during the sale, all those lambs that the buyer says that goes buyback, they will buy for that price. Now, if your buyer says they'll pay $200 and the buyback buyer will only buy it for $100, the person at the sale pays that extra $100 to close the gap. And so this works well for people who are bidding on an animal to help the 4-H or FFA member, but perhaps do not want to take the animal home. It usually means that they spend a little less money, and their buyback sale is a 100% tax deduction donation. So for some companies, this is how they like to support kids. Next one on the list is called a split buy. A split buy is when 2 or more buyers purchase one animal. To be honest, I think we see this more with steers because it's such a large bulk amount of meat. So maybe they've kind of talked ahead of time, and they might say, hey, I only have enough saved up for half a beef. Do you want to go together on this? They kind of agree on what they're going to spend. And then at the end of the sale in the ring, when they ask for the number of the buyer, they may announce 2 numbers, and that would mean that the purchase is split. Finally, we need to talk about this concept called taking home the animal. There's a couple reasons that the buyer may want the 4-H or FFA member to take the animal home. The first is occasionally they just don't want the animal and they want the 4-H member to go ahead and keep it. For example, maybe you're selling a goat and that particular person does not like to eat goat. Maybe they know it's a female that could be used for breeding, and so they simply allow that 4-H member to take the animal home. Another reason occasionally is that they have kind of special circumstances for processing. Maybe it's a pig, if you will, and they want the animal to be taken home and fed for an additional chunk of time before it's processed. That would be something probably your buyer would have talked to you about ahead of time. That's a pretty rare situation. But do be listening. If you hear the term take home, then you know that we have some details to work out there. And the best way to figure that out is to probably talk to your 4-H leader or talk to your buyer directly. It is worth noting that taking the animal home is not an option for grand or reserve grand animals, as per the rules in the fair book. All right, let's talk just a little bit about what it's like for a junior livestock sale buyer to come to the fair. There's some information that you can share with them to potentially make this process a little bit easier. As you can see in this picture, sometimes when it's during the show, we're working really hard to impress the judge. You're doing your best in showmanship. But we also want to work equally as hard to make that experience at the Mesa County Fair good for the buyer, especially if your buyer has never been there before. There seems to be a lot of steps to them. We want them to be able to spend the amount of money they choose and have a smooth and easy process. And most importantly, some interactions with 4-H and FFA members that make them realize the high quality value educationally and as part of the ag industry for our programs. Let's start with registration. When a buyer first comes to the fairgrounds, you'll want to share with them that they will need to register. Usually it's either in a tent near the show ring or in the show ring that they come and register, share their contact information and all that sort of stuff to get going. You will want to have given them a parking tag before this process. They're usually a different color than our exhibitor parking tags, and it allows them to park as close as possible. Once a buyer registers, they are given a buyer number and they can bid on any animal. They can bid individually or jointly. That number is recorded as the purchase, and then afterwards they are billed for that animal. Buyers may make donations to the sale. as well as add-ons, and so we'll talk about those. But first, you need to be aware that as you and your animal leave the show ring after selling, the auctioneer will say some things, and your parents and guardians and 4-H leaders and that kind of thing can help you listen for what's going on, but they will typically say where the animal is going for processing. So for example, if someone buys your animal and they say, we want it to go to D&M Meats, they will mark the animal with a colored stripe as it leaves the show ring. And then typically you just put it back in your pen until later that night when animals are loaded out to head to processing. Buyers can do a couple of things to help you out, and they do all of these typically at the registration table when they register to be a buyer. They can make a donation to be spread amongst several 4-H and FFA members, or to be with one member specifically. In addition, we have this thing called add-ons. Add-ons are just a donation. They don't receive any product in return, and they are 100% tax deductible. What they do is they make that money payable to the Chamber of Commerce, who helps with all the finances and the check writing part. That is a tax deductible then amount. The Chamber of Commerce kind of organizes all that money, and then later in August you receive a check with those add-ons on it. Add-ons are kind of cool because even if someone maybe isn't in a financial position to buy your whole animal, but say they have 10 different FFA members they really want to help out, they could say do a $25 or $50 add-on to each of those members rather than just buy half of one lamb or whatever that might equate to. So it's kind of a cool way for people to help each other out. When the buyer registers at the fair, they will make payment arrangements with the marketing committee and Chamber of Commerce then. One of the things I would recommend is that when you talk to your buyers about all of these processes, there is usually a little brochure that is created by the marketing committee. And I would say by mid-June, it is at the extension office. And so we like to get several copies of those brochures and some parking passes and kind of pick the buyers that are most likely to attend the fair and make sure we hand deliver those so that they have a paper that can answer all their questions, remind them of how the sale works, as well as a parking pass. When we start to look at marketing a project, if your brain is normal, probably there's a million questions. When should I start? Where should I go? Who do I talk to? What do I do at the fair? What do I do after the fair? What if I'm not successful? The next few slides we hope will answer some of those. The first is, when should you start? It's actually never too early to begin. Most businesses allocate the money that they're going to spend in terms of community contributions pretty early in the year. So for the most part, the early bird gets the worm, if you will. And so the earlier in the year you visit, the better off you are. That is not always the case, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. You are most successful when this is an all-year process, because the idea here is that you develop a relationship with a business, that you aren't just showing up to ask them for money. So maybe it's a place you regularly spend money. Maybe you drop by some Christmas cookies. You've made sure to thank them every year. You kind of develop this relationship that you're both parts of a community and you're there to benefit each other. This brings us to the question, where should I go? I truly believe there is two different answers for this. One if you're a first-year 4-H member, and one if you are a more seasoned 4-H or FFA member. I like this picture because it has the co-op banner in the background, and co-op has been a supporter of 4-H for years and years and years, and that creates some interesting things. There have been years when lots of 4-Hers went and invited co-op to the sale, And there are years where honestly no one invited co-op to the sale because everyone assumed everybody else was doing it. And so I think this happens more often than we like to admit. I would encourage you, if you are in doubt or you think someone else invited them, go invite them again anyway. They will never usually complain for having too many friendly invitations to the Mesa County Fair. If you're a first-year member, I would encourage you to come up with some local businesses that you know or that you have family friends at or relatives at, because then you're comfortable talking to them a little bit. Sometimes it can be intimidating at the very beginning, but the more you do it, the easier it gets to talk to businesses. Once you have gone through a year, the first thing you should always focus on is re-inviting your previous buyer and then branching out. We should always be contacting new businesses to invite them to the sale, even if that means you getting braver and braver through the years and walking in and introducing yourself. I've talked to multiple 4-Hers and FFA members that as they left the program, they shared with me the most valuable lesson they actually learned was how to walk into a business and talk to the owner, because that's really an easy transition into an employability skill. When you decide who you're going to invite to the sale, who do you talk to when you get there? The most formal and probably way that leads to the most success is actually to request an appointment or drop by repeatedly until you happen to find a time when the owner or manager is there. Oftentimes, if it's a customer-based service and you just go in and leave the stuff at the front desk, that's oftentimes not the person who makes the money choices. And so you want to be patient and try to find an opportunity to talk to the owner and manager to introduce yourself. No matter who you're talking to, please understand that the first priority for a business person is actually running their business and making a profit. While we always thank them profusely for supporting us at the sale, unless they are successful as a business, they can't support us. So be patient and understand you may have to stop by several times. We have found great success, and I think other families have too, with making some sort of flyer or handout to leave behind. On that, we make sure to have some pictures of the 4-H or FFA members so that they might recognize them, have the name, some contact information, things like that. Oftentimes you don't want to only drop off that flyer, but that can be a good way for you to leave something in case the owner or manager is not available. And last but not least, it sounds kind of silly, but I would encourage you to be brave. Oftentimes, our own insecurities convince us to not take the time to talk to the owner or manager, and that really can be kind of disrespectful to them if we aren't willing to be brave and actually stand behind the product that we're creating that we would like to potentially sell to them. Now, it's really tricky to figure out what to say in this process. I encourage 4-H and FFA members to practice a lot. Practice on your parents, practice on your brother, practice in the mirror. Go to your grandma's house and try out talking to them, because what happens is we tend to get very nervous and we forget everything we ever intended to say. And then you stand there in awkward silence and pretty soon somebody turns red or something like that. So the more you practice, the more successful you'll be. You'll want to introduce yourself. I encourage you to use a good, firm handshake. You'll want to say why you're there, what the benefits are to the business, what the process is like, and offer to answer any questions. We're going to come back to this slide here in just a minute, but I want to first show you these examples of some handouts. These are a couple members of our local 4-H club, and they gave me permission to share these with you. Mind you, this is just one model that a 4-H'er might do, but they found they wanted something with some of the details there to leave at a business when they visited. So they each wrote a little bit of a letter and included some pictures, the dates of the fair, things like that. Now, if I were to change these, I'd actually make sure that I included my phone number, maybe an email address, and some things like that. I do happen to know they handed them to the buyer with the flyer that came from the extension office and the marketing committee, the one that had all the details of how to buy and things like that. So that is additional information that they left. So picture me as a 4-H member. I have this great handout in my hand, and now I'm walking into a business. How would I do this? I would probably do it like this. Hi, my name is Ruth Shepherdson. I'm in the Platte Valley Extreme 4-H Club, and I wanted to stop by and invite you to the Mesa County Fair. This year, I'm raising a market steer. I've worked really hard with it for lots of months, and it seems to be growing into a good animal that will produce an awesome product. I enjoy raising steers, and I hope to be part of the cattle industry someday, so this is a way for me to get a start on that. I brought you some information about my project, and I brought you a flyer about the fair, and you can let me know if you want a parking pass. If you think you're going to come, I'll bring you back a parking pass. Do you have any questions about the Mesa County Fair? And then usually they'll answer some questions, ask some questions, or chit chat with you before you leave again. Keep it pretty simple, but definitely practice your spiel, if you will, a lot so that you can get the words out you want and not get too overly nervous. Then what? So after you've made some initial contacts with businesses, it's time for us to think about follow-up. There are a few tricks you can use as far as when to follow up and how to. I would always say after you've contacted a business to maybe try and do one more visit to them, say into June, early July, to check and see if they need a parking pass or anything else. We've made tradition in our family of also purchasing some tickets to the barbecue that goes on at the fair on sale day, because we think that's kind of a nice thing for us to, at least our last year's buyers, buy them lunch and invite them back again. When you do those follow-up contacts, you can do them in several ways. You could drop something in the mail to them. You can stop by in person again. You just want to focus on building that relationship. Maybe you visit 10 buyers this year. Oh, you know only one of them probably will buy your steer. But if all of those 10 buyers are bidding on your animal, your price will potentially be higher than it would have been. In addition, you're helping out the sale in general, because even if 5 of those buyers come, maybe there's someone else who didn't have a buyer show up, even though they went to 10 different businesses. We can't control what animals are bought once they get there, but we do know there's a very strong link between the buyers that people have developed relationships with and those who haven't been invited directly by a 4-H or FFA member. It's important for you to note that all marketing should be done prior to the fair. We should never be in a situation where we're going out, say, right after the show during the week of fair and inviting more buyers. It's pretty late by that point. Now, doing a follow-up call during the week of fair is a little different story, maybe dropping by a parking pass. But if you're making those initial contacts, those need to be done at the latest in early July, but probably far earlier in the summer. When you get to the fair, I would encourage you to, the day of the sale, be dressed and ready, have your animals ready a little bit ahead of time, and be hanging out near your pens. We find that a lot of buyers will come Saturday morning and wander around, look at all the animals, meet and greet 4-H members. They kind of want to hear your story. They want to see how you did at the fair. Maybe you can share your placing with them and things like that. In addition, say you see your buyer that you invited across the way there, I would not be afraid to go up and shake their hand and say, hey, thanks for coming. How's things going today? And strike up that conversation. It takes bravery, but it will pay off to you, and it is the best way to get to know other people. Be sure that you are presenting yourself and your animal in a really respectful way at the sale. We are under the public microscope at that point. And so even if you're just maybe kind of dressed sloppily because it's been a long week, not everybody knows that. So you might end up with somebody from, from downtown that comes in and they're like, gosh, 4-H and FFA members don't really take very good care of themselves and their animal, because they're only going to judge you off of that one day's experiences. So please understand and be respectful in all your actions, in how you dress, and understand that you're representing our programs. Now, after you sell your animal at the sale, there's a couple things that are good to do, and then we'll talk about completely after the fair. The sale happens very quickly. You're only in the ring for a couple of minutes. And so it can be a little overwhelming the first time you've gone through this process. You'll watch, and when it's time, you'll line up. You'll check in with your superintendent. When you get to the gate, they'll have you go in and they'll sell the animal. It takes maybe a minute, sometimes 2 minutes. During that time, I would encourage you to have another adult be really watching to see if they can pick out and listen for who purchased your animal. In addition, as you leave the ring, you will get a slip of paper usually that says something like, Valley Ranch Supply purchased your animal, or whoever the buyer is. But the hard part is connecting with who is there at the sale from that business. It's a really great idea if you can figure out who it is for you to go up immediately after the sale, shake their hand, thank them again, offer to take them a glass of water or something like that. You'll usually note at the back of the ring that there are some drinks set up. They are free for buyers, and so it's nice if each 4-H and FFA member stops by once or twice and grabs a handful of water bottles and just walks up through the stands offering all the buyers a drink of water, especially as we get to the end of the sale when they've been there for a few hours. Sometimes the end part of the sale gets a little emotional for some FFA and 4-H members who are not super excited about kind of parting with their animal. Be sure that you are always grateful in your actions and your words, that you talk to those buyers, and that you show gratitude to them. In addition, after the sale, it's important that you thank your buyer again in a more formal way. You will find some kind of plaque things at the extension office. Print off a nice picture of you with your animal, frame it, take it by with a plate of cookies, or some other way for you to really thank them for supporting your 4-H and FFA project. It's important that you thank your buyer pretty close to after the fair, within a couple weeks, a month at the latest, and you can either do it in one trip or two. Sometimes we like to do 2 trips, where one day we just take by the thank you plaque, drop off some cookies, thank them again, and then come back at a later time with the little slip of paper that they have to sign, verifying that you've thanked them. Unfortunately, we have to do this to ensure that 4-H and FFA members hold up their end of the bargain. We were having situations where buyers weren't thanked, and so that made it a really negative experience for them. Once you have thanked your buyer and they've signed the slip verifying that you have, you then take that slip down and exchange it for your check, usually 3 or 4 weeks after the fair. It takes a while for all the money to be collected and turned around and written into checks to 4-H and FFA members. It's a really valuable exercise for you to know and understand what your break-even price is on every animal you're raising. And I think in part that helps you recognize how lucky we are to have a junior livestock sale, and most times have prices that are well above market price, and allows 4-H and FFA members to go ahead and continue raising animals and learning from that experience. The best thing you can do to determine your success in the future is develop that relationship with the buyer so that they know they're appreciated and that they come back to the sale year in year. You hear stories of 4-H and FFA members who actually have the same business purchase their animal every year because they have done such a nice job of showing gratitude to them and always communicating with them and inviting them back to the sale. Please understand that marketing for any business does not stop at the sale. You have to continue to develop that relationship with the buyer for your animal. I hope that this presentation has been helpful to you. If you have further questions, I would encourage you to contact your 4-H leader or FFA advisor, or either of the marketing committee members whose numbers you see on the screen. These are both people here who are here to help 4-H and FFA members and donate large amounts of time to make our fair and our livestock sales successful. Have a great day.